Hello, so I wanted to do a video about scrim nets. Now I'm probably going to have to wear camouflage for this to work effectively, and maybe the mirror will play a part in this video. So I talked about scrim nets a little bit when I did a video on camouflage not too long ago, or avoiding detection. So a scrim net is basically this. Now you can get camouflage ones, and I have got a camouflage one to show you in a moment, but a scrim net is basically just sort of a woven netting that's in camouflage colours. Even if it's just one colour, then it would still function as a scrim net. So the idea of a scrim net is there's several things you can do with it. You can either wear it over yourself, as I've sort of shown before, like that, or double it several times, and that should make you harder to see because obviously your skin is not obvious under it, and the human silhouette is less obviously a human silhouette shape if you've got a scrim net over you than if they can actually, somebody would actually see you. So that's the primary use of scrim nets. Now, what intrigued me when I did the video, and I sort of found this out as well from Googling, is lots of Americans, for whatever reason, don't know what a scrim net is. Now, I'm going to assume it's because for a long time the US militaries, the US Army, Marine Corps, maybe all those sort of things, didn't use scrim nets when they were kind of common with lots of other nations. No idea why, that's just maybe a theory. But I have heard lots of Americans refer to them as sniper veils, or sniper sheets, and then I found some people calling them that, but they're actually called scrim nets. And again, I don't want to get pedantic on terms because different people in different countries call them different things, but these were originally always known as scrim nets. So obviously the point is that you can hide yourself very well with a scrim net. So this is a standard type one, so this is what I want to hopefully do. Now if I hold it up in the mirror, you might be able to notice that it becomes really hard to actually see the mirror behind the scrim net, although it is visible through it. So that should give you some idea of how effective a scrim net is. Similarly, if I drape it over the camera, I have no idea what this will look like. Will you even be able to see anything other than blackness? Not really. If I put it on less fully, you'll actually be able to see that maybe you can see some light through that. My finger's on the other side. Let me just try and drape a single layer of the scrim over. And then obviously you can see through it at close range quite easily, and it's easier with your actual eyes on the camera. But the somebody looking at you would have a much harder job. So what I can actually hopefully do to give myself a bit more distance, and obviously I wouldn't be camouflaged in here anyway, is stand behind the camera a bit with this over me. Let's just wrap it around a couple of times. Obviously that's not really perfect, but just for the sake of the video. Now let me stand behind the camera. Now hopefully you'll be able to see the reflection of me in the mirror wearing this. The further I get away, the harder it would be to make out details, so let's take the scrim net back off. But the point being that scrims work really well for that. Now you can get camouflage scrims as well, so let me just grab one of those. So this is a camouflage scrim net. It's very similar, but it's like the more modern way they seem to be done by a lot of nations. Now this is just one that I ordered from China, and it was basically where you could get pretty much any of the modern camo patterns printed on it. So I decided I really wanted one in, this is Marpat. They didn't call it Marpat, but this is Marpat. It's, the US Marine style camouflage, because you very rarely see Marpat stuff for sale here. So this is kind of where people know them as sniper veils a bit from. You have a camouflage pattern printed on them, and then it obviously becomes quite a lot harder to see that there's somebody behind the thing. So obviously if I had that on like that, you would be able to see that there's a sort of human silhouette shape, but obviously it's much better at being disruptive than regular scrim net because it's actually got a camouflage pattern sort of printed on it. To the other side, if you look at it though, you can clearly see it's sort of a scrim net kind of material. Thankfully this one's kind of a tan colour or a brown on the back, rather than being bright white, because I have seen some of these printed ones, they've only printed one side, which is not helpful at all. But the point is that at a distance, especially if you are laying down under it and you're wearing camouflage, it becomes much harder to actually work out that there's somebody there because of how well the human silhouette is hidden. Now, scrim nets are really cheap, this is the thing. You can buy scrim netting, like these sort of sizes, for normally a couple of pounds each on eBay or Amazon, either buying the old army surplus ones like these or buying the new modern printed ones. So you can pretty much find them in any camo pattern you want, fleck tarn, woodland DPM, whatever. And this kind of one, I kind of like this material more, but as I said, having a camo pattern printed on it properly works much better, because you can probably already see from doing this that as long as it's not completely pulled tight to your form, it's really hard to notice somebody's there. So this is where I think they get known as sniper veils from, that if you lay flat on the ground, on the grass, with one of these sort of put over you, which I'll try and do at some point in a later camo test video, when I can get somebody to help me photograph it, that's where these become really useful, because you can obviously lay flat and have this on top of you, and it's really hard at a distance to work out somebody's there. Because if you had something like this on the grass, especially if it's longer grass, draped over somebody, it's harder to see the human silhouette, which means it's obviously harder to make somebody out, and obviously if it's quite flat as well to the ground, it's really hard for your eye to actually notice that there's something obviously there. Especially, as I was saying, if it's bigger than the person, doesn't make a silhouette, if that's making sense, because I'm rambling a bit with this. So, just to give you an idea, what I'll do is I'll film me from a bit further away wearing this, just so you can get an idea of what it would actually look like with maybe 2 scrim nets on. Just, you know, not how you're really meant to wear it, but just to give you an idea of how well a scrim net would actually work at hiding you. Now, while on the subject of scrim nets, before I forget, I should probably also point out that they can be used sort of in camps to hide camps. Now, there's a kind of scrim net, it might have a different name, where it's basically like a much bigger one with sort of fake leaves on it, or fake foliage. And the idea is that you can hang those over tents and things, or just hang them from trees, and if somebody's casually looking at a distance, it's very hard to see that there's actually objects behind it, because when it looks like actual leaves and sort of foliage, it's doing its job properly. Now, even with regular scrim nets like this, I think you could do quite a good job if you were out sort of in the woods and trying to make a camp. If you got ones that were sort of fairly weatherproof and wouldn't rip easily in the wind, you could sort of hang them from trees, obviously, in front of things you were trying to hide, and it obviously becomes quite difficult, as I was saying earlier in the video, to see that there's actually stuff behind the scrim net. Now, if somebody gets close enough, obviously they can see it's a scrim net, but the interesting thing with something like this is because it's partially see-through, but not completely see-through, and because it's not in the shape of a person, if something camouflaged like this was hanging at a tree in a distance, and light can still move through it properly, unlike somebody wearing camouflage, it's actually much harder to work out there's something there, simply just because of the way the eyes work and the brain works with shape pattern, recognition pattern, or stuff like this. So scrim net is really useful. So this is a rambling video on scrim net, mostly just because I think a lot of people aren't really aware what scrim netting is, especially people who seem to be really into sort of survival type stuff, where they're always talking about what camouflage they can need, but nobody ever mentions this, because I think even mediocre camouflage patterns and jackets on with scrim netting is much better than, you know, actually some of the far better camouflage patterns, simply because by removing your eyes, or your eye or somebody else's eye's ability to work out that there's a human silhouette there, obviously, you do a much better job of slowing down the reactions of somebody trying to guess you're there. And as said, if you were to lay flat on the ground in the woods, and then you were to drape this over you when you were laying flat, I'll just demonstrate this quickly here, although I'm obviously on a carpet, I'm not, you know, laying flat in the woods. You'll realise just how, you know, difficult it would be to notice a camo pattern like that amongst leaves and things like that on the floor from a distance than it would be, you know, whatever. So I'll flick the light off and show you that now. So yeah, that might look silly, but hopefully it will actually demonstrate just how effective this sort of thing is as well. Another use for scrim net obviously would be if you did have a bag in the woods and you wanted to hide it, especially if it wasn't a camouflage bag. Laying a sort of scrim net on top of it would do a very good job as well with actually, you know, hiding the colour of the bag or whatever else. You don't just have to hide yourself with it, you could hide equipment with it. So that's another use for it as well.